Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back to another edition of the special program on Star TV. And I'm your presenter, Sara Camara. Today, we have a very important guest in our midst. It's not a person other than Dr. Bilal Phillips. We will be talking to him regarding, his early life, his education, together with his preaching and his career. And we're also talking about the IOU, that is International Open University. Dr. Philip, welcome to Star TV.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me on, and I hope our interview will be beneficial.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much. First, can you tell us who Dr. Bilal Phillips is?
Well, first and foremost, I was born in Jamaica, so I'm a Jamaican. I grew up in Canada, so I'm a Jamaican Canadian. I was born in a Christian family, raised as a Christian. In Canada, when I went to university, majored in biochemistry, I became a communist and was active in movements in the US and Canada which were communist affiliated. In 1972, while being engaged in a nationalist, socialist movement in Canada, I converted to Islam. And after converting to Islam, having a desire to study Islam in depth, to understand it properly, because I couldn't get sufficient information from everyday Muslims who were just giving their own cultural interpretations or histories. I sought to get a scholarship and was accepted in Medina University in 1974. I went there to study. I did a Bachelor's of Arts after a 2-year Arabic Institute course. The Bachelor's of Arts in Islamic Sciences called Usul al-Din, and dawah was a part of that curriculum.
Okay. Now, before you before you converted to Islam, looking at your early life, your childhood, you spent 11 years in Jamaica before you moved over to Canada, but you did also spend, some time also in Malaysia. That was around 1964.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. You've done a good background check, search. I'm just trying to save time because otherwise the story is quite lengthy, So, but it has its own significance. My family moved to Malaysia. Both my parents were teachers and experienced teachers who went to Malaysia to help train teachers in Malaysia. Okay. So while I was there, actually, my my family adopted a Muslim boy in the family. And that was our first close encounter with Islam.
Okay.
But it wasn't explained. Okay. We just saw our adopted brother doing things which we didn't do. Okay. We just said must be part of his culture, whether it is going in his room and finding him in sujood, and if you've never seen sujood before, it can be a little disconcerting, what's he doing with his head on the ground.
So how was it like you seeing that for the first time?
Yeah, as I said, it was surprising. Myself.
Confronted your parents?
No,
didn't. About it?
No, didn't. Yeah. No, because that was their decision. So he became a family member. So that was his culture. But I observed also during Ramadan that my mom would get up early in the morning and prepare suhoor for him. And if we had dinner and my mom was cooking pork, she would cook fish for him.
Okay.
So we understood their dietary differences. You know, there are certain, I guess, prayer differences. Other than that, I mean, he was normal. You know, there was nothing strange other than that. But he was too shy as a cultural Muslim. You know, he was too shy to say anything to us about, give us dawah,
Yeah.
so to speak, you know. And we were too shy to ask him, you know, what actually are you doing there on the ground? You know? So that was just an experience.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I accepted Islam in Toronto, yeah, so many years later, almost 10 years later, that when I was taught prayer, how to make salah and sujood, then I realized, oh, that's what my adopted brother was. Yes, he was a Muslim. So then I went to see him. He was in Montreal at the time. Oh, not in Ottawa, the capital, studying in university. And of course, he was very happy to hear that I had converted to Islam. Very, very happy. And I was a little bit upset because, you know, I said to him, why you didn't say anything?
Why didn't you say anything?
You know, the whole time we were there, he didn't say anything, you know. Yeah. He said, well, I said, you know, I was too shy, really, you know, because your parents were so kind to me and looked after me, etc. I didn't want to say anything which might create, you know, confusion in the family and, you know, problems or anything like that. So, but I said, no, anyway, it's just, you know, it's your duty. Yes. You know, you can't worry about those matters because it's a job of every Muslim to share his or her faith with others around them.
Okay. Was there any moment, there any events in your childhood, you know, that you needed to overcome?
Events from my childhood?
Yes. And what did you learn about those events, you know, growing up?
Well, I can't really think of any particular events that I needed to overcome. That's if we say Jamaica. I don't think there was really anything outstanding. You know, parents going to study in Canada. They went to study in Canada, and myself, my brother and sister were left with their relatives. So nothing really there. But I would say probably in Canada, first going to Canada, at that time, there were very few black immigrants in Canada, you know, and most of the immigrants that came there were from Europe, European backgrounds. So the schools that I went to, I remember, I guess, which would have been, you know, middle school, high school, had very few black people. Okay. In the middle school that I went to, I was the only black kid in the whole school, you know, and in high school there were only two of us, myself and a female. So, you know, there were psychological things, of course, that you had to deal with at that time. But, you know, I can't say that they had really a major impact. But what it made me lean towards, I guess, was the movements in the U.S. which were, you know, black-oriented, like the Black Panthers, you know, and Solidarity Defense Committee of Angela Davis, California. So I leaned and read about Africa and about the African struggle for liberation and all this, Lumumba and the various African leaders who were enlightened and understood the importance of Pan-Africanism and these kind of things. Okay. So, but Islam overtook that. So my focus didn't remain there, okay, per se.
Okay. You've mentioned that you've converted to Islam, that is in 1972, right? But I know that there's a book that won over you, all right? That is Islam, the Misunderstood Religion, by Muhammad Qutb.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Muhammad Qutb. That was the book which convinced me. I only read a couple of books. Something by Maududi, Towards Understanding Islam, which was a good introduction, and Muhammad Qutb's book, which was a comparative study of various systems, whether political, religious, social systems, communism, capitalism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, a comparative study, which after reading that book, it became clear to me that all the systems had good in them, because he identified the good. He didn't just attack them. He pointed out the good principles that they had. And all of them had negativity in them, except Islam. So what I concluded from that reading was that, the good that was in the various systems, right, political, etc., religious, they were all found in Islam. There was nothing good in any of the other systems which wasn't already there in Islam. But the negative, the bad, which existed in the other systems, which are man-made systems, that bad wasn't found in Islam. I mean, Muslims might engage in it, but it isn't a part of Islamic teachings. So for example, if for any reason, Muslims were engaged in racism, for example, which is evil, Islam is against racism, So also, the communist way, of people working according to their ability and only taking from the system what is necessary for them to survive, that is unnatural. It's a nice thought, but it's not the nature of people that when you work, you don't take according to the efforts that you've made. We are naturally inclined towards wanting to, if we work harder, to get more. That's so the communist system, which based itself on this philosophy of Marx, Engels, was bound to failure because it went against human nature. So that was the, you could say, defining point in my journey, which put me on the track of Islam.
Okay. But how difficult was it, to adapt, to Islam? You believe, you believe in communism at that time. So now you're changing, coming to Islam, adapting Islam, preaching Islam. How difficult was it?
Well, I didn't find much difficulty. A lot of people, when they convert to Islam, their family is opposed, their society, people around them, their friends. I didn't find that. That wasn't an issue for me. My parents adopted a Muslim boy. They were aware of what Islam was about and respected it. you know. So there was no struggle in the family. And my friends who were still in the communist movement, you know, African nationalist communist movement, they were easily swayed by the history of the struggle in Africa against colonization, colonialism, because the leading movements in the north of Africa, in Algeria, that fought against the French, etc., you know, the battle cry was Allahu Akbar. So, which means Allah, God is great, you know. So, and these people were revolutionaries. So there was no apparent contradiction between the revolutionary movement for change, social change, and Islamic values. So for me, the transition was quite smooth. So the only thing left now was for me to go and get solid knowledge about Islam, because what I was getting from the people around me was a bit confused, you know, because it was said that you, as a Muslim, you had to follow a madhab. You know, there were 4 and you had to follow 1. They're all correct. They're all correct, but you had to follow 1. Yeah.
So that's the main reason why you went to Medina?
Well, because the concept was illogical. When, though they were saying all 4 are correct, there were contradictory differences amongst them. Because if you followed the Shafi'i school of thought and you accidentally touched a woman, your wudu would be broken. But if you are a Hanafi, your wudu is not broken. So if they're both correct, it means you could be without wudu and having wudu at the same time, which was illogical. That's like asking us to believe in 3 gods in one, you know, of the Christian tradition. So that, to me, represented some form of confusion, which needed clarity. It's okay, the common person could live on with that, you know, that's a theory, an idea, and not worry about its contradictions. But for me, you know, being a thinker, you know, you could say I'd been through a journey to that point. I needed answers. I couldn't just go ahead with things as they were. So going to Medina and studying there, doing my bachelor's there, and to Riyadh, following that, doing my master's in Islamic theology, and joining Wales University and completing my PhD in Islamic theology. That was the educational journey for giving me the intellectual insight and understanding of Islam to feel comfortable with what I'd learned, to be able to explain what seemed contradictory, etc., and to move forward. And my forward step from the time I went to Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, my forward step was into education, teaching. I got a job whilst I was studying as a for my master's. I was teaching in high school, Islamic studies, for high school and junior high school there. And that became the foundation for dawah in application. I studied dawah in theory in Medina, but there was no application. Okay. They were just talking theoretically. So the dawah in action began there in Riyadh for me. In Medina, it wasn't necessary because everybody was Muslim, you know, and the core of da'wah is inviting non-Muslims to Islam, though it could invite Muslims to proper Islam, you know. But so in Riyadh, I also became active in giving dawah lectures to foreign workers.
Yeah, because we've also, I've also seen, is it true that during the Gulf War, during the Gulf War that you organized a religious, revival meeting for U.S. troops, stationed in Dammam, where over 3,000 soldiers converted to Islam?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's towards the end of my stay in Riyadh, or in Saudi Arabia, which was a total of 20 years. I was engaged in the promotion of Islam to American troops that had come to fight Saddam Hussein, who had moved into Kuwait at the time, and Saudi Arabia was expecting them to make the next move into Saudi Arabia. So America sent 500,000 troops there and stopped Saddam Hussein's advance, his troops. And after the war, which was very short, 7 days, I think it was, a 7-day war, then this 500,000 troops had to be processed back out of the country. So as they were in their encampments, like in areas in Dammam, there was an attempt to provide for them activities and articles, things which they could buy, because mostly when people are there as foreigners, they weren't given the open access to the whole of the country. They're kept restricted in the area in order to avoid any incidents which could reflect negatively on the presence of American troops there. So they kept them more or less confined to certain areas.
Okay.
So that made it easy for us, those who are concerned, and myself in particular, to set up a dawah center in the midst of the American troops encampment. And of course, we didn't set it up with a banner saying Dawah to American Troops Center. It was the Saudi Arabian Cultural Information Tent. So we avoided words which would imply that we were, trying to promote Islam to the troops. And they were very open anyway. It was not really an issue, but we were concerned to not create any wrong impressions so that we become accused of trying to force people to accept Islam, these kinds of things. So we provided all the cultural information they needed, the history of Saudi Arabia, books and booklets and things on it, and the animals of Saudi Arabia, the plant life of Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. All of that was provided. But on the tables which had all of these books, we also had some pamphlets and booklets on what is Islam, because it's part of the Saudi Arabian culture, right?
And how many books have you written so far in your career?
I've written more than 50 books, 50 different topics addressing what I saw as a need for clarification. So my writing was more, you could say, educational related. It wasn't writing like fiction, etc., etc. This is all non-fiction, and on different fundamental and critical areas which Muslims, whether new Muslims or born Muslims, needed to know about. So the first major book which I wrote was called the fundamentals of Tawheed, about the Islamic Unitarian principles which distinguish Islam from the other religions. Also, I wrote books which were educational for high school, junior high school, Islamic studies books, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are around on the market. And I wrote according to needs, like, for example, the need for a book on dream interpretation, because this is an area that people commonly ask, you know, how do you interpret my dreams, you know, people like to ask this, etc. And the book which was available on the market, which was Ibn Sirin's book on dream interpretation, was not authentic, right? And it contained actually support for the use of amulets and other, you know, mistaken and misguided practices common amongst Muslims in different parts of the world.
And are your books free to get access, or you have to buy them?
Well, the books are paid for. You have to pay for them, majority. Then there are some books which are dawah oriented, like one of the first books I wrote was called The True Religion of God. So this was taken from a lecture which I gave to a stadium full of Filipino workers. And alhamdulillah, after that lecture, about 25 of them accepted Islam. And you know, that became a standard booklet for dawah centers in Saudi Arabia to share with people. And until today, it has been translated into many different languages and is available online, and it's free, perfectly free.
Okay. What led to the establishment of Islamic Online University, now International Open University? What led to this, to the establishment in 2001 in Qatar?
Well, it wasn't actually 2001, and it wasn't in Qatar. But I had become, after being a high school teacher of Islamic studies, in the 90s, I had moved to the UAE, and I became a lecturer in university, in the American University in Dubai. So I taught for 10 years there. I also taught in Preston University in Ajman, set up a Department of Islamic Studies there. And that brought my writings to more educational texts which could be used in the courses, which in English, which were not available, you know. So that was the foundation now of university level concern for education, setting up English medium avenues for learning Islam on a higher or tertiary level. I moved towards online education when I found some people contacting me online and asking me about certain websites that they wanted to go to study Islam. But it's known that there was a lot of misinformation on the internet at the time and till today. So they wanted to be sure, is these sites okay?
Are they genuine or not?
Yeah. So, you know, when I looked, one of the main sites which I saw called sunnipath.com, it had good information, but it also had misinformation. So I didn't want to tell them don't go there, because then they had no other alternatives online. So this is when I decided I needed to help create or establish an alternative for people. You know, so I could tell them, okay, go and You can study the courses on hadith, or the courses on the Sira of the Prophet ﷺ. But the courses which were on theology, no, better stay away from them, because this is where they had issues. So that led me towards trying in UAE, trying to set up in 2001 a university online called Islamic Online University. However, or maybe I think at that time it was called Islamic Studies Academy. Yeah, ISA. Yeah. But I started off there and was unable to complete the transition into an actual university because we didn't have the IT knowledge to set it up ourselves. Myself, my son, who was studying IT at the time. And at the same time, we didn't have the funding to purchase learning management systems for universities, institutions, because they were at that time very, very expensive, way beyond any budgets that, I could handle. So we tried it on a simple level using a database, and it worked for about a year. Then the database started to malfunction and started to crash. So my son advised that we shut it down. So I shut it down at that time. So it ran only for about 1 year, and then we gave people back their money. And I had to wait until 2007 when an Australian educator created a learning management system for educational institutions and gave it to the world for free. The system is called Moodle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you people have so many branches around the world now.
Yeah, well, from there, actually, I also joined Knowledge International University in Riyadh, and set up their Department of Islamic Studies in English medium. So that gave me the experience of working now. I'm not sure what system they were using at that time. Maybe it was Moodle, maybe, I'm not certain. But they had a system. Of course, Saudi Arabia, they can afford the more expensive one. So either way, I was involved in that, setting it up, working with it, etc. But it was limited in scope. They didn't really want to expand. So then when I had the opportunity, after going to India, setting up a university in Chennai called Preston International College, which continues till today, when I had the opportunity, after going and setting up that college, to set up the Islamic Online University, I took this step and did it in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
And right now, how many branches do you have around the world?
Well, the university is online.
Online, yeah.
So we don't talk in terms of branches. What we do have, based on a project that we are working on in Africa, is called a learning center. We set up learning centers for people to study where they are. They didn't have to go anywhere to study, go overseas or whatever. They could study in their homes. So that's the principle of online learning. So it facilitates learning without having to go through the trials of, travel and even going to universities as opposed to just studying from your home. But what arose when we launched the project in 2017 to benefit the impoverished. I mean, you could look at the statistics in Africa, where only 6% of those who graduate from high school find places in university. This is the situation here in the Gambia. You know, that there was obviously a great need for educational access, tertiary educational access, for those who were graduating from high schools in the rural areas, etc., who couldn't afford to come to Banjul, the capital, in order to access higher education. So this was similar in situation in most of the countries of Africa. So we launched a project called the One Mass Project, which is 1 million scholarships for African youth, Muslim and non-Muslim, wherein scholarships were provided for students to study for free. They didn't have to pay anything. So in fact, 1/3 of our student body, current student body, which is close to 8,000 students, are studying on scholarship. They don't pay fees. But we have raised the cost of the fees through other sources, you know, from charitable organizations or whatever. We have raised the cost because, of course, the university couldn't function without fees. We're depending on fees for, you know, operation. So that project led to the idea of learning centers, setting up learning centers. You know, in all of our countries, we have over 200 countries where students are studying from in the IOU. We do have centers for examinations, because final examinations have to be done offline to verify the identity of those who are writing the exam. You know, this is to remove the possibility of cheating. You know, getting your brother or your cousin or somebody to come sit in the exam for you. Exactly. So we have those. So we have a system of examination centers around the world. However, those centers don't belong to us. They belong to various organizations, you know, institutions, etc., that have agreed to collaborate with us. Some of them charge the students fees, others don't charge. It's up to them how they work it out. But the student has to work it out with the local learning center, examination center, which is in their area. But when we launched this project of scholarships for the underprivileged in Africa, we were stumped at what to do when we gave the scholarships to students here in the Gambia, because we started off here. We gave them the scholarships, and then they asked, okay, that's very good, thank you, but do you have a computer? We need a computer. You know? So we hadn't really planned for that one, right? And then after we got them the computers, we were looking at iPads and these kind of things. We came up, okay, you better just get a computer. Then they were saying, well, what about internet data? Oh, I hadn't thought about that either, because it's so easily accessible in the West. You know, it was not a consideration. But now we had to look, okay, we have to be able to provide data for them. How are we going to do this? Are we going to put our courses on hard drives so they can just study off the hard drive or something like this, and then go to internet cafes and do their tests? And is that how? Then after we were trying to figure this out, they also added, and also we need electricity. Oh no. So what do we do now? You know? So at that point we realized we had to create learning centers for these impoverished, underprivileged to be able to study. So a learning center now is basically a computer classroom, not a computer lab. You could do it in a computer lab, but a computer lab, all of the computers are networked. And they're all studying exactly the same thing. But in the computer classroom, every student could be studying a different course, different subject, different, you know. So they're not networked. And they needed also supervision, because we found that when we set up the computer classroom, as we did here, and we put the students in, and that's after vetting the students and everything, making sure that they do have the level of qualifications necessary to get into university. What we found was that in the first semester, there was like 80% dropout. Yeah. And went into the second semester, we tried to fix that. What's the problem here? That's, maybe it's the quality of the students. Okay, we're letting those who passed get in simply because they passed. But, if they're at the bottom of the barrel, educationally, then you're starting with poor material, and as they say in computer language, garbage in, garbage out. So you had to get a higher standard. So we had to set some standards now. We didn't want to deny people simply because they didn't do so well in their examinations, but we had to use some kind of educational testing to determine those who were serious and were ready to make the effort. So we chose 2 courses which I gave online for free, called the Foundations of Islamic Studies courses, which I had given in Ireland, a few years before, and complete courses, which could be finished in a week or 2 if a person stayed on it. And we said, okay, you need to complete that to show us that you are serious. You're not going to be dropping out, after halfway through the semester or whatever. So that was a means now to weed out those who were serious. One, we looked at those students who had higher grades. We gave them preference, but we didn't cancel everybody else, but we gave them the preference. And also we gave them, a course, this 2-part course, which would confirm their ability to learn how to study online, and their stickability, their willingness to stick to their studies and complete them. So when we added these factors, it dropped the dropout rate, but still, it was maybe around 50%. At that time, we could see statistics in South Africa that even in offline universities, the dropout rate was 40%. So that still was something, So we had to find other ways and means to try to mitigate this problem. And we found one of the things that the students told us was that they felt, alone. They were used to studying in a classroom.
Yeah.
So now when you're just given a computer and you had to study on your own, right? There was no connection between you and the other students.
You feel lonely.
Lonely. You're all by yourself.
All by yourself.
And it's like you're just in the matrix.
Yeah.
You're just communicating with somebody online just for information and so on. So there's no social interaction also.
Yeah.
So this is when we realized, okay, the learning centers had to be organized in shifts where the students could be monitored, and there would be a supervisor who was responsible to make sure that they were studying the modules that they needed to be studying, and they were on the path to success. So the Learning Center now became a computer classroom with a manager who supervises the students, making sure they get there on time and they leave on time, and different shifts, because with a 25 seating capacity, you can get 100 students studying there in a day, because the student only needs to put in about 3.5 hours to 4 hours max, daily for them to be able to complete their study materials.
Now, IOU is a success. Why do you change the name, from Islamic Online University to International University?
The change was based on the change in the nature of the courses offered in the university. When we started in 2010, we only offered Islamic studies or Sharia degree and an Arabic degree, literature, language. By 2014, 2015, we started to increase the number of disciplines that we were offering. So we started to offer education. We also started to offer Islamic banking and finance, information technology. At the same time, we were offering psychology and so on and so forth. So the number of courses that were not specifically Islamic now were more than the Islamic courses. So the name Islamic Online University became misinformation for people, thinking that they only offer Islamic studies. So we had to change to a more general title for people to understand that all of these things are available. So this is why we shifted to International Open University, saving the acronym, because Islamic Online University is IOU, International Open University is IOU. So there was no problem in terms of our logo and all these other things. But that was the purpose of the change, But I should mention that Gambia, has become for us a pilot project for the implementation of this one mass scholarship program for Africa. In that the Gambia is small, 3 million plus people. The country itself the regions are small. So it's easy now to implement the Learning Center project in the Gambia. So our plan now is to put learning centers in each of the 7 regions, so that the idea is to bring the university to the people rather than the people to the university, right? So we've started with Jarasoma. We opened up a center there with a graduate. One of our graduates is the manager, and this is what all of the centers will have, graduates, IOU graduates to manage it, or others if they have learned all of the, the ins and outs of online learning. So the idea being to do what the government per se, is not trying to do. It has its own, priorities, etc. TVET is a, big priority, so we needed to produce some kind of momentum towards what I feel is the actual solution for tertiary education in the country. And it is only going to come through online education, because with 6% entering into higher educational institutions, that 94%, you can't build enough universities to supply their needs. It's just not possible. The costs that would be involved are prohibitive, unless you found oil wells off the coast of Gambia, and Gambia became a super rich country like Qatar or something like this. Other than that, it's not going to be possible. So the only way forward is through online education. And alhamdulillah, I met with the president of the Gambia a few weeks back and presented the concept to him. He was very supportive of it. He encouraged, the importance of online education, and advised me to, collaborate with the UTG I was already in collaboration with them, but further collaborate with them and also with the governmental ministries and all this. And we gave him a check for 1,000 scholarships for the Gambia that he would have disbursed to the needy Gambians. I mean, it's not to be given to the ministries to pass out to their friends and family members. And,
so, but you think that will not happen?
No, we require.
How are you going to monitor that?
Because we will have a committee which vets the applicants. On that committee, there will be people from the ministry, there will be people from IOU, people from other institutions that are connected with us to ensure that the students who get the scholarships are students who are basically eligible for zakat. That's the basic principle, and that's what we intend to implement. And inshallah, we have done it elsewhere successfully, and we're in the process of implementing it here. So the value of that 1,000 scholarships, according to UTG fees, is $4 million. So yes. So the check was for $4 million, but it actually was for 1,000 scholarships. Yeah.
Okay. Now, coming back into your career, what obstacles, have you faced along the way?
Well, I think we have obstacles relatively frequent, when you're involved in implementing projects of benefit, social benefit, etc. It may take some time to convince others to recognize the benefit in what you are promoting. And sometimes it's there is resistance to change, because people like to keep things the way they are. That's easier and more comfortable. So when you're talking about change, it's very difficult. So this is one of the reasons that when people ask, why did you choose the Gambia to be the headquarters of the IOU? One of the main reasons is because the Gambia was open to online education. Other countries, the educational authorities don't want to hear about online, because all they know of with online education is degree mills. You go on, you pay so much money, you got a degree. So they feel that, and cheating and all these other kind of things, very easy. Okay. Right? So they're unconvinced that online education is the way to go. Of course, COVID woke them up, right? Put a bit of fire under them. They had to say, oh, well, okay, now we are scrambling to try to figure out what to do, etc. For us, COVID didn't even touch us. We didn't even blink an eye.
Yeah, it doesn't affect you
at all, because we were right in sync, with the needs. Yeah. So this is, I think, most of the difficulties have come from the fear in Africa of online education. Whereas America, the West, UK, they've embraced online education years ago, but the educational authorities in the third world, in the underprivileged world, they are still thinking, 50 years ago, as distance education, where you came to the university, they gave you some books and things, they told you to study and come back and sit your test and go back and then come back and meet one or two professors and go back, that this is what is an acceptable model. It has been for 50 years, right? But the point is that technology has moved ahead. We're way past that point.
Exactly.
but their thinking is still there. So they have rejected the idea of a completely online university. They say you must have face-to-face. You must have that face-to-face contact with the living teacher, because face-to-face could still be online and live. It could be online and live, but then no. What's the difference? Whether you actually have me sitting with you, or you're watching a screen and I'm behind the screen talking to you. Oh, it's no difference.
There's no difference, really. Yeah. So, looking at your views regarding Islam, and then looking at the Western world also, what do you have to say about it? Because sometimes the way the Western media portray Islam in a negative way.
Well, that's a big topic. I've left that to Dr. Zakir Naik, you see, on Peace TV. He can work on that, in terms of the image of Islam to the people. My focus is on educating Muslims. That's, educating Muslims in the countries of the third world, which we dominate. So that's the focus. By educating Muslims, where all of our courses are taught from an Islamic perspective, so even though we're teaching IT or we're teaching business administration, it's all taught from an Islamic perspective, meaning that the students will be taught what is taught in the regular universities, but they add also another dimension, which is the Islamic view on what is being taught. In case there are things which contradict, go against the teachings of Islam, they will clarify that for the students. So there is Islamic learning process going on, and also reminding the students in the course of the studies of their moral obligations. So what we're doing is actually bringing morality back into the classroom. With the turn of the century, Western nations shifted away from religious education. They took it out of their schools. But what they didn't understand was that when they took religious education out, the moral guidelines which were being provided by the religions, was also being taken out. So people were just studying the cold facts, and right and wrong became what you thought was right, what I thought was wrong, or we said, okay, democratically we can decide if something affects everybody, not just you as an individual. So as long as the majority of people feel this is right, then it's right.
Okay.
And if the people tomorrow feel that it's wrong, then it becomes wrong. So you don't have a stable moral compass in the society.
There's one topic I want you to talk about. I've seen that you've dealt with it before. I don't know whether it's factual or not. But that is rape in marriage in Islam.
Okay, this is one of the...
What is your view towards it? Because this is... there are a lot of, views, regarding this topic.
Okay, the thing is that rape in marriage, marital rape, is a feminist argument based on the belief that males and females are equal, exactly the same. What's good for males is good for females. It should be exactly the same. But the reality is that males and females are not the same. That's why in the Olympics, we don't have men competing against women. Why not? If they're the same, that's what we should do. But reality is that if you did that, the men will win all the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So the idea that there are differences and differences in responsibilities, etc., this idea, is looked at as being backwards and, archaic. It's not relevant in these times when women, due to technology, are able to do their flying planes and driving tanks and, buses and all these other things now, jobs that were normally male jobs, women are doing them now, and it's happening in these societies. And they say, well, when you don't do that, then half of your population is being prevented from being in the workforce, prevented from benefiting the society as a whole. This is part of the arguments which are used. But from the Islamic perspective, the responsibility of the male is different from the responsibility of the female. And the family has to have a head. They say, well, no, it's 50-50. But the point is that when you have 50-50, what happens when you disagree? Because you're not going to 50-50 agree all the time, right? You're going to disagree.
Exactly.
So if both are exactly equal, then what happens? Marriage breaks down. So that's why you have the rate of divorce in the West just shot up. And it's still shooting up because there's no head of the family anymore. People are equal. And of course they want to divide up the inheritance equally also. Yeah, but the son and the daughter, what's the difference? They're not operating under the responsibility principles of Islam, where a son has more responsibilities than a daughter. If the parents die, he has to take over and manage the situation that is there. He is obliged to do this and that for his sisters and, his mother if she's still living, and the father, and so on and so on. So the inheritance is divided up based on the roles of the members of the family. Males have more responsibility than females. That's just the bottom line. And it is the natural way, Throughout history, as far back as we go to societies all around the world, they've been led by males. Yeah. So when you see a situation like that and you still want to insist that no, they should be equal, then how are you going to explain that males have led societies in 99.9% of the circumstances throughout history? How do you explain that? The only thing they left to say now is the men are oppressors. Yeah. They're the bad guys, So they attack males. So chauvinistic and all kinds of terminologies to indicate, that males, have all kinds of gender bias and issues and this, like it's all the men. It's their fault,
Okay, Doctor, how do you want to be remembered? Dr. Phillips, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want the world to remember you?
Well, since I was put some 5 years ago in the Jordanian Journal of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world, I was added to that journal, which comes out each year. And in subsequent years, I've been there regularly. And I was put there primarily because of the International Open University. So the motto of that university is changing the nation through education, changing the ummah through education. So I would like to be remembered as the founder of that university, which would ultimately spread across the world and be a key force in changing the educational opportunities that were given to the underprivileged members of society who are the majority, giving them a chance to rise up and to be a part of development of various countries around the world. So that would be, my greatest legacy, and I pray that Allah allows that to manifest itself, inshallah.
All right, Doctor, we've come to the end of the program. What message do you have for the Muslim Ummah and also for the Gambians? We've seen that, Gambia is like the second home.
Yeah. Probably some of the slaves that were brought to Jamaica were from the Gambia. So it's like first home.
First home, okay.
The Prophet ﷺ, he had instructed Muslims to seek knowledge. Talabul ilmi farida ala kulli Muslim. Seeking knowledge is obligatory, a religious obligation on every Muslim. So I would pass that message on, first and foremost, that Muslims need to know Islam, because we have a lot out there now which I call Mislam, not Islam, Mislam, something else, his lamb, her lamb, their lamb, but not Islam. This is first and foremost, we have to fix ourselves. Then the Prophet ﷺ had told us, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, convey whatever you have learned from me, even if it's only one single verse. This is a responsibility. Gain knowledge and share it with humanity around you. People say, one verse? Yeah. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. That says everything. Say, Allah is the one and only God. That message, the rest of the world has lost. This is what makes Islam unique from all the other religions. All the other religions, God is not one. God is not one. You have many gods. Hinduism, which is among the major religions of the world, is thousands of gods. Cow is a god. Rat is a god. The elephant head god, Ganesh. The monkey god, Hanuman. No end of gods. And even Christianity, who says, Christians who say that, God is one, but he's three in one. You've got three gods. That's the bottom line. There's no three in one. You go through the whole of the Bible, from beginning to end. There's no three in one there. This is something people made up. And it is illogical. And then you have to answer the question, well, who was Jesus praying to? Because in your Bible, you've got Jesus making prayers. Prayers to who? Oh, it's to God. But you said he's God. God the Father, God the Son are one. So who was he praying to? Some people say, well, he was doing that to show people how to pray. Wait a minute here. He was praying to himself in order to show people how to pray. This is confusion. And then if you ask a Christian today, so where's God right now? Sorry, where's Jesus right now? He's sitting on the right hand of God in heaven. But you said he was one. How can you sit on the right hand of yourself? This is illogical.
It's confusion.
It's confusion. So that message, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, is a devastating message. Because the mass of Christianity don't understand that God is one. And so they worship Jesus instead of worshiping the God of Jesus. And they are the largest religion in the world today. So that one verse is powerful if you've understood it. So then that obligation that the Prophet ﷺ put on us, بَلِّغُ عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, this is something every Muslim should feel a sense of responsibility for. Convey whatever you learn from me, even if it's only one verse of the Quran. So that is relevant to non-Muslims as well as relevant to Muslims. Because the message of Islam, you know, is a holistic, complete message governing all aspects of human life. You know, you cannot come up with an aspect of human life and say, Islam is irrelevant here. There's no Islam here. This is outside of Islam. No. It is going to be either wajib, obligatory, something we should do, or it's something that is recommended for us to do, mustahab or sunnah, or it is mubah, meaning you can do it or not do it, no problem, or it is disliked in Islam, or it is something forbidden absolutely in Islam. It's one of those 5 categories which governs everything in existence. So Islam is the all-encompassing way of life, not a religion as people generally know it, which is named after an individual. That's why Muslims reject the idea of being called Mohammedans. Yeah, no, we're Muslims, not Mohammedans. Christian and Christians, I mean, they came up with that name. Jesus never told people to call themselves Christians. No, people began that. Paul of Tarsus, he's the one who began that, giving the name to the followers of Jesus as Christians.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. It's been a long journey. I know that, we can sit down and talk and talk and talk. You are an open book, that Gambians and the whole world, can learn from. We've seen a lot of your work, that you have done both visual and both online. If you go online, there are so many videos, of Dr. Phillips, so many preaching, that you have done around the world, and I think a lot of people recommend, and then appreciate, you, and a lot of people learn from you, and I think the Islamic Online University, or the Open Online University in the Gambia, is also a big blessing, for Gambians, because I've seen a lot of Gambians who have gone through the university, and there are so many people who are even, in fact, lining up, to have access to this university. And I only hope that the scholarship, that you've provided, to the president to distribute, will be distributed fairly, so that people, in the rural areas, because when we talk about poverty, I think those people, the level of poverty there, is higher, than the urban area, and I think they will have more access towards it.
Well, that's for sure, because, the 1,000 scholarships which was given to the president is not the end. That's it for the Gambia. No. Anybody can come to our headquarters, where we are right now, can come here and apply for a scholarship. You don't have to wait for the one that's going to come through the Ministry of Higher Education and so on and so on, which is to be dispersed. We are not limited to that. So anybody who wishes to avail themselves of scholarships, they can come. We may run out, because we can't necessarily take an overwhelming number, because we have to be able to run the operation, with fees. That's what we're functioning from. But in general, it is open. We have already, before this gift to the Gambia, we already have, many hundreds of students who are studying on scholarship with us.
Okay, thank you very much. That was our discussion with Dr. Bilal Phillips on this special program live on Star TV. The program will be coming back. That's going to be next month again. We see what all of you out there. It was myself, Sara Camara, and we have the honor to interview Dr. Bilal Phillips on this present program. Thank you very much.